What's up, guys? It's me Boxing, and today I'm going to be listing the top upset in boxing of 2020 in my opinion. And first of all, I'm going to be listing a top 5 honorable mention spot for the other upsets this year that happened, in my opinion, not to make it into the top 2. And this list is not going to be in order, it's just going to be 5 fights that weren't in the top 2, as I said before. First of all on that list, I have Carlos Gongora versus Ali Akhmedov, which ended in a 12th round knockout win for Carlos Gongora. Second, I have Ray Guajardo versus Clay Collard, which ended in a second round KO win for Clay Collard, where that fight was a war. They both dropped each other multiple times, Collard being the underdog and the journeyman, or the B-side, seen in that fight, and Guajardo seen as the unbeaten prospect that was on his way up. And then I have Vasily Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez, which, even though it wasn't that big of an upset, being that the odds were very close and it was seen as a 50-50 fight, but many people, from what I saw, were predicting that Lomachenko would win that fight easily and outbox Teofimo Lopez, but what happened was Teofimo Lopez bullied Lomachenko for the first maybe 6 or 7 rounds, and then he ultimately got the job done, getting a unanimous decision win to become the quote-unquote undisputed lightweight champion, even though in my eyes he shouldn't be, because that franchise title isn't really a belt. But moving on, I put Subriel Matias versus Petros Ananian, which ended in a unanimous decision win for Petros Ananian. And Matias was seen as an unbeaten guy who was looking to get another easy win over Ananian, but what happened was Ananian got to drop Matias and controlled the fight, in my opinion, and that happened on the Wilder vs. Fury 2 undercard. And finally, I have Eleider Alvarez versus Joe Smith Jr., which ended in a knockout win for Joe Smith Jr. after it was the first time Eleider Alvarez has ever been dropped and stopped, and he was just getting dominated throughout the whole fight. And now moving on to the top 2 upsets of the year, in my opinion, it's obviously Adam Kownacki versus Robert Helenius, which ended in a 4th-round knockout win for Robert Helenius. And then I have Jason Rosario versus Julian Williams Jr., which ended in a 5th-round knockout win for Jason Rosario. And digging into those fights, that Adam Kownacki fight was for the WBA heavyweight world title eliminator, and many people were not giving Robert Helenius a chance at all in that fight, being that he came off of a knockout loss to Gerald Washington, who was an opponent that Adam Kownacki knocked out easily in 2 rounds just about a year before their outing. But that fight was just specifically a huge upset, being that Helenius, as I said before, he's lost to an opponent that Kownacki beat. Also, many people were seeing Robert Helenius is sort of now a heavyweight gatekeeper, being that he just lost to, in some people's eyes, not a great fighter, and that he was getting older, and many people were seeing that he would retire soon. But what ended up happening is that Helenius dropped Kownacki and battered him to get the 4th-round knockout win. And you guys gotta remember, still, Robert Helenius is not a bad fighter at all, even before that fight even happened, when they were going into it. I wasn't really giving Helenius a chance at all. I predicted likely a 5th-round knockout win for Kownacki. But boxing is boxing. He hit him with a great shot, dropped him in the corner, referee called it a slip. Then another knockdown followed by a 1-2 with a jab, putting Kownacki down. Then Helenius walked down Kownacki into the ropes, and ultimately the referee stopped it. And now Helenius, I believe, is the WBA Gold Heavyweight Champion. I don't really think that gives anything, being that WBA is just making these random world titles, and they're calling them titles that really matter, even though I think the WBA Gold Belt doesn't really do anything for you, being that Joe Joyce had that belt, and obviously he went nowhere with it. But moving on to the next fight, it was between Jason Rosario and J-Rock Williams, a.k.a. Julian Williams Jr., and in that fight, Julian Williams was the unified 154-pound world champion, coming off of a win to Jarrett Hurd, where he did drop him and win convincingly on points. And really in that fight, Jarrett Hurd seemed unbeatable at the time. He was beating everyone, had that war with Lara, and he was the unified champion. And he looked like he was supposed to get that win in his hometown. But ultimately what happened was he got humiliated, and Julian Williams took his world titles. And this fight with Jason Rosario was seen as a stay-busy fight, where he would just get the knockout win against Rosario, then move on to rematch Jarrett Hurd. But what ended up happening is that Rosario was sort of controlling the pace after the first 2 rounds, and then ultimately Rosario was able to hurt Williams with a huge uppercut. Williams was so hurt, and he was trying to hold on. He went to the canvas, stayed there until the referee had to pull him up because he was just staying there because he was so hurt, and he knew the referee wasn't going to call that a knockdown, so he just stayed down trying to recover. Then ultimately Rosario landed a beautiful uppercut again on the ropes, and the referee stopped the fight standing. And both of these fights were excellent fights in my opinion. Both had back and forth action, as in the first couple rounds in the Kownacki fight, it was sort of a war. Both guys were trading, landing good shots, and that Rosario fight was a very competitive technical fight. Most people are picking Rosario versus Williams as the upset of the year, but I'm actually swaying towards Kownacki versus Helenius, being that many people did not give either guy's a chance at all, but Helenius specifically, because he was getting older and he was coming off a brutal loss to an opponent that Kownacki blew out easily. But that Rosario fight, I didn't even know who Rosario was at the time. Sorry to Rosario, but it was also a mega upset. I wouldn't be surprised if anyone gives Rosario versus Williams as upset of the year, which I've been seeing most of the time, but I'm going to give it to Robert Helenius versus Adam Kownacki, being that both fights were more than 10-1 underdogs. I believe the Kownacki-Helenius fight was 10-1 underdog, which was Helenius, and I believe it was the same for the Rosario versus Williams fight. But even though the Rosario-Williams fight had more on the line because it was unified world titles, but that Helenius fight, because if Kownacki were to win that fight, he would have been fighting for a world title, being that it was for an eliminator, and Kownacki was coming off of some great wins against Charles Martin, Chris Arreola, and many other fighters to mention. So overall, my upset of the year pick is Robert Helenius versus Adam Kownacki, which ended in a 4th-round knockout win for Robert Helenius, as I said before. And yeah, that's really it. I'm MMU Boxing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.